Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Diana Marques Lyons, and she had a shared near-death experience. Am I saying it right?
Shared death experience.
Shared death experience with your mother. And we're going to get into some other topics because you want to give them a little bit about your background so they know who we're dealing with here.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me, Peggy. Well, I had a shared death experience when my mom passed away. And I also have experienced a Kundalini Awakening. And as a result, I ended up studying this phenomenon for years. And I've been working as a therapist with hundreds of people who've had these experiences, not only with their experience, but their after effects, and helping people to integrate these experiences into their lives. And I've been doing that for many years, and I also give lectures about it in different places, in
Awesome.
conferences.
Do you want to start with what happened with your mom?
Sure. Back in 2010, my mom all of a sudden became sick. Nobody expected that. And she was hospitalized, and all of a sudden, all her organs began to shut down. And both my sister and my brother experienced the shared death experience. And we went from the extreme of being completely devastated because we were so very close to her. We were spending day and night at the ICU. We didn't leave the hospital. And all of a sudden, we were at the point of getting a nervous breakdown, to all of a sudden experience the other extreme, which was to experience this immense peace and bliss and love, which was a gift. It was such a extreme opposite, and you could feel the energy in the room. And it was interesting because other people were present, but only my sister, my brother, and I experienced it. And it was just so unbelievable. It was such a gift. It was so much love and so much peace. And there was a light. And I knew my grandmother was waiting for my mom. And it was just so sweet. And the experience was the most beautiful experience that I ever had. And the thing that was just amazing was because a second earlier was the other extreme, the most difficult time of my life, because my mom was my best friend. She still is. Mm-hmm. I could feel her sometimes. So it was just so beautiful. And the experience stayed with us for hours, maybe for a day. And afterwards, I looked at my sister and my brother, and we're like, did you experience that? And we're like, yes. And we validated each other, which was amazing. Back then, I didn't know about shared death experiences. It was later when I found out that Dr. Raymond Moody had one and actually wrote a book about it. But it was just so beautiful. So to experience what my mom experienced at her moment of crossing over, and it gave us so much peace knowing that she was in a perfect place, that she was actually better than we were. So it was very beautiful.
When my first mother-in-law passed, I come up with the word beautiful death as I'm having this kind of a communication with her, as she already passed, but I went to say my goodbyes. And I said to her, you had such a beautiful death. And, since then, I was thinking of that term as you were saying that, because that's something we don't hear. Someone say they had a beautiful death.
Yes, it was such an honor to be there, because it's crossing over to the afterlife, where you are a perfect, beautiful being. I mean, it's just beautiful. It's amazing. And just thinking about it makes you feel like that, as you know, when you remember your experience. So it was a gift. It was absolutely a gift. And it was interesting because about a month later, I experienced a glimpse of the same thing. One night, if you want me to share it,
Sure.
one night I had just had a car accident, and I was just devastated, from the loss of my mom, because you still grieve, afterwards, because the person is not there with you. And I went downstairs to turn off the lights, and all of a sudden, I felt the same thing. I felt this love and this peace more than anything. And I actually felt my mom's energy. I felt her like embracing me, and I could smell her perfume. And I said, "Mom," and it was great.
Yeah. You're so fortunate that you had such a close bond with your mom.
Yes, it was just, I felt very fortunate. And coupled with that, I had been experiencing what is called Kundalini Awakening. And with the Kundalini Awakening, you have the same after effects, or some of the same after effects, of someone who has a shared death experience or a near death experience. And it has been absolutely transforming in so many ways in my life. So much that I sometimes don't recognize myself. If you want me to, I could
Sure.
explain
Yeah.
what
What
that
does
is.
Kundalini actually mean? I hear it and I never really thought, what does that mean? The word.
Kundalini Awakening is actually something that happens to a lot of people who have near-death experiences. It opens up, channels the energies around the 7 chakras, starting from the base of your spine, and it moves upward. And basically, what it does, you could actually eventually experience enlightenment. You just become your true nature, which is pure love, pure joy, pure peace, while you're still here on planet Earth, which is amazing. I mean, I'm not enlightened, but I'm in the process of the Kundalini Awakening, and you have glimpses of higher states of consciousness where you experience, I call it waves of love, unconditional love for everyone that you think of, everyone. Even the person, the most cruel person that you could imagine, you experience these waves of love and compassion. So, which is very beautiful. But one of the things that you experience is some of the after effects that you have with the near-death experience. Like, for example, you sense people's energies. You become so sensitive to people's energy. You become very empathic. Like, you experience people's emotions like you're walking in their shoes. And sometimes, I mean, I've learned how to deal with that as a therapist, but it's something that you experience. You become extremely empathic and very sensitive to energies. You walk into a room and you just feel the energy. If it's negative, you need to walk out. Another thing that you experience is, your relationships begin to change. Some of them suffer because people don't understand that you've changed. So you gain new relationships. You lose some, but you gain some. And you experience some physical symptoms too. Like, you feel these rushes of energy going through your spine, and sometimes a lot of pressure, especially in the crown chakra. And that happens, at least with me, almost constantly. So I have to be well rested. It's very important to get myself grounded. That's one of the after effects. So for some people, they start moving in directions that they have no control. That doesn't happen to me, fortunately. For me, it's more the moving of the energy constantly, and I feel it physically. And, the waves of love. that is just very intense with anybody that I put my attention on. But the thing is, when you become someone very empathic, it's hard, because if you are next to somebody who experiencing pain, you take it on. Like if I walk or drive near somebody who is homeless, I feel what they feel, and it's just very overwhelming, and I feel compelled to do something about it. So that's some of the after effects. There are some other after effects with the Kundalini Awakening that are physical, that are very uncomfortable. Sometimes you feel pain out of nowhere, but then it disappears. I haven't experienced that anymore, fortunately. So that's basically what happens, is the moving of the energy going upward.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to, before you went on, I just want to kind of clarify so everybody knew what you meant when you said this Kundalini Awakening, because a lot of people are like, oh no, oh, here we go, black magic.
Right. So anyway, as a result of having all these experiences, I began to study all this phenomenon and the after effects, and also the integration of this. So I became certified by ACISTE, which is the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. And I also became very involved with IANDS, and I started a group, a support group in the Shoreline in Connecticut, where people would meet once a month to talk about it. And I began to also work with, like I mentioned before, with many, many people who've had this experience, to both help them integrate this experience and to validate their after effects. And there are many after effects. One of the after effects is that you lose the fear of death, but also one after effects is that you could become very depressed to be here on planet Earth, because you long to be there again, in that place of unconditional love and peace and joy. So some people become very, very depressed, to the point that sometimes they get pathologized and they are given medication. And of course, it doesn't work. So that's one of the after effects. Another after effect is the change of how you view reality. Like I've heard many people that they come back seeing people like walking like paper dolls, because this place where we are is not real. It's like a dream compared to the other side that feels more real than real. So that's a big shift, and it's difficult. And oftentimes people describe it as not being 100% here, but with the one foot on the other side and another foot here, which makes it hard. And so again, relationships get compromised. And one of the things that happened is that the divorce rate for people who have this experience is very high. It's about 75%.
Sounds like it's kind of like going back to work after you've been on vacation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good analogy. So a lot of times people end up getting divorced, which is a huge loss, because their spouse cannot take all the change that you're going through. You know, they can understand that you love all other people as much as you love them, so they could feel threatened. Another thing that happens is your values change tremendously. A lot of people stop being religious. That's what happened to me. I stopped being religious. I grew up being Catholic. And I mean, of course, you know, I could go to church when I had to for a wedding or a funeral, but I just became much more spiritual. So that's something that happens. You become less religious and much more spiritual.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean you become atheist. I think a lot of people hear that when they say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I think a lot of people think, oh, they're atheists. They assume.
Oh, exactly the opposite. For a lot of people who didn't believe in God, when they have this experience, of course, that changes completely. So, but their values change also in that they change careers and jobs. Like if somebody was a police officer, they quit. They couldn't hold a gun and potentially kill somebody. So they changed careers oftentimes to one of service, to make a difference in somebody's life. That's one thing that changes. For me, it was easy because I was already in a profession of service. So another thing that changes is you lose interest in trivial things. Like, for example, people talk about, shopping or, trivial things. You are no longer interested in that, and you have a much bigger interest in things of, what's the reason for us being here, and spirituality and things that are deep. So that's another thing that changes. So that's something that changes in terms of friendships, because you're not interested in trivial and superficial topics anymore.
I kind of look at it as, my NDE After-effects or spiritual experiences, or you get in this zone, that feeling, and it's like a spiritual high that you get addicted to. And the more you do it, the more you want to do it, like somebody's addicted on a drug, but it's just this natural high.
Exactly. You said it beautifully. That's exactly what happens. So, and so experiencing that high, like I oftentimes when I go to a party and people offer me a drink, and I say, I don't need to drink, because I already feel that bliss, that high. So that's very true. And for some people, it stays for a long time, for months, or if you're experiencing a Kundalini Awakening, it's just something that you experience all the time, which is beautiful.
And I don't know about you or other people, but when you get into a negative space, like I carry that negative, and I like, how do I wash this off of me to try? And I have to like be conscious of it and work at it and try to do things that give me that high again. This the only thing that will like wash that. Like I think of my mother, like this negative space, as I walk in a room, and then I carry it. And like I had to do an interview last night, and I thought, I'm not gonna go see my mother at the nursing home today because I'll have that negativity with me, and I didn't want it. So I'll go see you after I'm done with you today. So I get things done first where I don't want that baggage.
Exactly, because you're so sensitive to energies. Exactly, that's hard. I know what you mean. So one thing that is very helpful is to shift your attention to something that feels better, and then you go back to that feeling of bliss, of feeling good again. Yes. Yeah, that's something that I know what you mean. I mean, I could relate to that, because when you're in private practice and you're listening to people's problems and traumas, that happens. But I learned how to shift that and turn it into a positive. And like when I'm with a client, for instance, that is relating a trauma, I always touch into the spiritual aspect, who you are, who they are. And it's transforming for me and also for my clients.
And it's funny how it goes across the computer too. Like, I do these on Zoom, and some guests are, I don't want to say dark energy, but they get into some really dark stuff, or some are just like flat effect. And I feel like somebody's just unplugged my energy.
Right.
And it's funny how it goes across the computer. You don't have to be physically with them. You're picking up their energy.
Exactly, because we're all connected. We don't see it, but we're all connected at all times. And actually, that's one of the after effects. Some people could actually see the energy ties that we all have. We could see auras. You could see, the color of aura of each person. So that's what happens, because we are all connected. If we put our attention on somebody who's negative, we could feel it. even if we're not with them in the moment.
And it gets hard when you get used to being in your happy place. I can't hardly watch like scary movies very often, anything war, anything, these action men movies, and like I gotta get out of here.
That's something else that happens, Pegi. I could not watch violence. You could no longer watch violence or something so negative because you feel it. And what's the point? So I, as a regular rule, I don't watch the news unless, it's something that I have to do about it. And I don't watch violence or, like you said, scary movies. No way. Mm-mm. And that's something that happens in general to people who have near-death experiences. They become so sensitive that they completely avoid anything to do with violence, including the news.
Yeah. When I used to work in the emergency room, I'd have to go to the bathroom just to get away and pull back in, because I felt like I was out there everywhere in pieces with everybody. And it didn't make sense to me at the time why I had to do it. I had to be in this tight enclosure to feel, oh, there I am again.
Exactly. I know what you mean, because then you're feeling everyone's energy. And of course, you are obviously very, very sensitive and very empathic. So I could relate to that as well. And a lot of people have to go through that. And it could be very challenging because you could be in a room giving a lecture and you could feel somebody's, devastated emotions, and you start to cry. So you have to excuse yourself. So it could be challenging to be that empathic and to feel people's emotions.
I had a guest on recently. She was singing on a stage, and out of this whole crowd of hundreds of people, there was this one man that was glaring at her, and she could not take her focus off him the whole time, wondering, what, am I singing wrong? Is there something on my face? And just his energy, she could not shake.
Wow. See, that could be very, very challenging. So that's something that you learn to do, to ground yourself. One thing that I know it helps is if you have the opportunity, if you have the chance, like now the weather is nicer, to walk in nature, especially with your bare foot. Your bare feet is something that is very helpful. But anyway, so there are many after effects that could be challenging. There are some that are very, very good, because you become more compassionate, more understanding. But there are also after effects that could be challenging. Like if you don't have the opportunity to change careers and you're stuck in a job where there's a lot of negativity, that's very difficult.
Yeah,
that's tough. So that's one of the things that I do, is help people integrate their experiences into their lives so they could be happy and be here. Because one of the things that happens is people can't wait to find what's their purpose so they could go back. And part of the purpose is not just to learn lessons of love, but in the process to be able to enjoy it. So again, that's another after effect, is that people have this urge to find what their purpose is. And sometimes they can't figure it out. Sometimes it just takes years to figure what that is. For me in particular, it was not that difficult. I figured my purpose is to help people, to make a difference. But for some people, they have a hard time doing it. And in an effort to figure out what their purpose is, they change careers, they volunteer, maybe with hospice. But that's another after effect, that urgency to find their purpose so they could meet their purpose and be able to go home. And which, by the way, a lot of people call it the home of all homes. So, and you probably have heard of people who are scientists who themselves have had a near-death experience, who completely shift their lives completely. They themselves try to figure out, you know, this did really happen to me. And of course they find out, yes, they actually died. And so this happened to a lot of people. Another thing that happens is that you could experience a near-death experience without having to die. You could have a shared death experience. You could be meditating. I know people who actually sit down to meditate who had what is called a near-death experience just by doing it. Also in moments of extreme stress, in moments of terror, like you could be driving and all of a sudden, like you feel like, oh, you're gonna hit this car, you're gonna be dead. You're terrified. You don't hit the other vehicle, but you are experiencing a near-death experience in the middle of it. So as a matter of fact, I might add that Dr. Raymond Moody coined the term near-death experience because he realized afterwards that you could have this experience in many different ways. So that's something that I wanted to add.
I think maybe the difference with a near-death experience is you're not just in this happy place, you have stepped into that realm. And in that realm is this all-knowing and perfection. You know, the voices come in of wisdom and, you know, all the things that happen within your death experience.
Right.
It's like putting your foot, I guess, in a kiddie pool versus putting it in the ocean.
Right. Yeah, that's a good analogy. You know, you get these downloads of information that a lot of people describe, and then they come back with all this knowledge, and people are sometimes, when they share that experience, people get afraid. I've heard people many times say that people actually run, that they are scared, even though they are talking about a beautiful experience. People get very scared, and even family and friends and religious people, they get scared, which is very, very painful. So people they feel isolated a lot of times, unless, you know, they join a group and they hear a video like your podcast. And until they hear about it, they feel very alone, very isolated. And it's you know, it's very sad. You'll be surprised, Peggy, even now with social media and all these videos, you'll be surprised how many times people have these experiences and they have no idea about it. They never heard about it. And they share it with a loved one or a doctor and they get scared or they get pathologized and they just shut down for many, many years until they hear about it from somebody else. So that's something that happens. People feel they become isolated, and they feel very alone with their experience until they hear about it. So what you're doing, Peggy, is a great service because you're giving a lot of people who don't know about it this knowledge, and not only for the experiencer but for their loved ones, because oftentimes they just don't want to hear it. They get scared, and like I can think of different people that I have worked with that they shared the experience with a loved one, with their parent, and they just brought them to their priest, for example, and the priest told them, you know, you shouldn't talk about this because, you know, you could be locked up, so really you shouldn't be talking about it. So, and then they stopped talking about it for decades, until they meet somebody who had this experience or they hear a podcast like yours. So
Yeah.
that's a painful after effect.
I think a lot of us just know when and where to not bring it up. You know, like when I was going to Catholic church, I would have never brought up anything because I knew the reaction. I knew what it would be. And then I would go to a nurse friend of mine, her church, she would invite me, and I knew not to bring it up there either. It's just certain circles, you just know this isn't a good place. This is
Right.
going to be accepted.
Right. You learn little by little not to share it, who to share it with. So fortunately, this information is out there more and more through social media and groups like ACISTE and IANDS. So I could tell you that being isolated before you find out is one of the most painful things, because not only you're sad to be back, you're depressed to be back, but you can't even share that. So it's one of the most isolating experiences that a human being could have.
I
When that
described it
happens.
before as like being in a can and then it get opened up, cracked open when you start to find a place that you can share it, find the words to express it and let it come out like genie in a bottle.
Yes, yes. And some people use that analogy, and it's interesting. That's another after effects, not having the words to explain it, because there are no words sometimes in the English language or in any language to share these experiences. I mean, like you asked me to share this experience, but well, it doesn't really do justice, but it's just that there are no words in the English language to describe these experiences. And as the years go by and you talk to people, then you start putting words into that experience. So that's another after effect. Sometimes people, go ahead.
It's a shame when we have them, we can't talk about them. Like you and your siblings talked about it later, but it's like mum's the word at the time. It's like we're so shocked and surprised and kind of shy of saying, I'll tell my husband anything, so I can tell him now as things happen, but not anybody else. Later, like when something will come up, like we're talking to a guest, then I'll think, oh yeah, this happened. But at the time, it's just like mum's the word, and it's a
Right.
shame that we can't celebrate it at that moment. This just happened and this was wonderful.
Right, because it's such a gift. If you look at it, it's a gift to have this experience, because you learn that we are eternal beings having a temporary human experience, that we're just, but you're lucky that you have your husband, because a lot of times their spouse is the last person that they could talk to, because they just don't want to hear it. They get scared.
My husband heard early on how many divorces come from things like this. And I think he thought that's not going to be us. And I think he really took it to heart that I'm going to be there for her because I don't want divorce over this.
Wow, that's amazing. What a blessing that is. That's definitely a minority. So that's a gift. Yeah, because, I see the opposite most of the time. And what I do is I ask the person to bring their spouse, their families in the session so we can talk about it. I could give them information and I could validate also what they're going through, because, the person that they marry is very different now. So that helps to bring them in, for people to look for someone who could help them with their, with their spouses or their families.
And I think we all have to deal with our own prejudices when we have these experiences against ourselves, because we say to ourselves, that sounds crazy, I can't tell someone. Where if we didn't have that judgment call of that sounds crazy, therefore I can't say, we're putting the gag on ourselves until we get comfortable, like, I'm taking that gag off.
That's right. That's a very good point. One thing that I want to add is that, sometimes people become addicted to a substance because they want to just escape being here. And because, let's say they got divorced as a result of it, or they don't get accepted with their after effects. Sometimes people start drinking or using substance and they become addicts as a result of it. And I've even had people who contemplate committing suicide, but they know from the knowledge that they got during their near-death experience that that's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to do that, but that's something else that happens. You know, people become addicted to a substance to sort of numb the experience here, but of course it doesn't work.
I think when you've had a near-death experience and some of the other experiences, some of us realize there's an intelligence governing all of this, and we will be held accountable in whatever way, we don't know. But I'm not talking about hell, you know, I'm saying there's going to be accountability because we know we're being watched. I mean, anybody that's had a life review knows all our memories must be recorded, even things we've forgotten, and they will be used to show us something, teach us something. And it's so fascinating.
It is fascinating. And when people experience the life review, people change so much because they know, oh my God, I don't want to experience this, because oftentimes during the life review, they experience in the third person perspective how your actions, your thoughts made somebody else feel, and not only them, but the ripple effect of that. What a lesson. So, and one thing that I have to add that I have seen is sometimes the life review is so intense that they come back with PTSD as a result of it, which is interesting. Let's say they have a life review of experiences that they didn't remember or they had blocked, they end up with post-traumatic stress disorder. But the life review is really, what a lesson. And you're right, it's not about hell, what goes around comes around, and it's not as a punishment. We're here to learn lessons of love. And for everyone is different. For some may be being more patient, for someone else may be being forgiven, for somebody to be more compassionate. But that's something that I have learned from so many people sharing their experience, hundreds of people sharing their experience with me, is that we're here to learn lessons of love. That's it.
And I've heard some people describe their life review similar to a strainer, like all this dirt, the bad stuff, it's got to be sifted out. Like before they can go in this perfect white space, this bad stuff's got to be removed first. And that's I thought, right. Well, it makes sense, because God's not going to have a heaven with mean, hateful people like we have here on earth. We're all going to have to be perfected, I would think, to be there.
That's right. We come here to evolve spiritually. That's here. We come here to evolve, to grow. And sometimes life could be tough, but through those painful experiences, we learn, we evolved for sure. So we don't have to come back so many times, so it's very helpful.
I just kind of think of people, like I used to work on the pipeline with my husband, and that would hear a conversation like this, think, what a bunch of crazies. Not understand a word.
That's exactly right. And you crave being able to meet people that you could talk about these things. You crave being able to talk about it. Just like you're not interested in talking about superficial things. You crave being able to discuss this, spirituality and what life is about and lessons. One thing that I have to add is that there are people who have negative experiences, and according to the data, is a very small percentage, and it usually ends more often than not in a positive way. But one thing that I have learned is that at the end, even if you have a negative experience, sooner or later, we all go into the light. We all do, which is reassuring. So for people who are listening to this, if they had a negative experience, we all end up in the light. Anyway.
I think everybody that has a hell experience, once they cry out for Jesus, A
That's
hand
true.
comes down, light comes or something, and they're lifted.
That's exactly right. That's very true. And one thing that I have to say is that negative experience tend to be underreported because of the stigma attached to them. You know, people imagine if it's hard to share a beautiful, loving experience, what it's like to share a negative experience.
Right.
It's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah,
You
like
know,
you or I right now, an hour from now, be in a car wreck and go to hell. And next month when we're healed, are we going to come on and say I went to hell? You know?
exactly.
You?
Right. So people are much less likely to share these experiences, again, because of the stigma attached to them. So it gets underreported. But one thing I know is that most of them end up positive, and the ones that don't, I could assure you that at the end, everybody ends in the light. As a matter of fact, some of the experiences that I've had, they were able to go to many different realms, many different dimensions, and they learned during their experience that every single person, every single soul ends in the light sooner or later. So it's reassuring.
Yeah. I hope people don't think so. I'll just do whatever I want and then I'll just pay for it later because I think I'd rather straighten it up now.
I think so. That's a good point. Exactly. So you don't have to do it again. Um, like I mentioned before, one of the after effects is having a Kundalini awakening. That happens a lot to people who have near-death experiences because channels get opened, except that for somebody who has a near-death experience, it opens up all at once. It's a shock to the nervous system. It's a shock period where you could experience a Kundalini awakening in a gradual way, like I have. I've had that for many years, but it's become more and more intense. I think with me, it started by doing transcendental meditation, which actually releases deep-rooted stress from for many lifetimes and surface stress. And so gradually, you become more your true nature. And as a result, sometimes you end up with having a Kundalini awakening. So I wanted to mention that. So another thing that is hard for people is to integrate these experiences into 3D, being a mom, being a wife, having a job, paying bills. It's hard for some people and it takes them years. I've had people who in the beginning, they can't even go to a restaurant. They can't go anywhere because it's just too overwhelming. The noise, everything is just the noise, the lights, everything they're sensitive to everything. So they just become they just want to stay home in their little space. And sometimes it takes them a long time to come out of it and be able to live a normal life. There's, the number of people that I've seen with that is not large, but it's still there where they can't function at first because being here is just too much. So that's something that people seek help to be able to get out of that and gradually being able to integrate into a normal life, being able to, take your kids to school and work and whatever you have to do, go to the store, go to a restaurant.
Now, how do you get the word out about your services?
Well, I have my website. I have Psychology Today. They have me on the ACISTE website and I think on the IANDS website as well.
Because you're new to Ohio. So I was just kind of wondering how that establishes, again, being such a rare field.
Well, I work with people from Ohio, from Connecticut, from anywhere. I get calls from anywhere in the country, and sometimes even from Canada. I got it from the UK, from Mexico, from different places when they hear about it.
Oh, so are you doing yours online then?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
still. Yeah.
Did you see where the governor of Ohio's given like $83 million for education and counseling using COVID money?
Wow, really? No kidding. I wasn't aware of that. You see, I don't see the news.
Yeah, it was just like a couple of days ago. You know,
Oh,
$83
wow.
million for
Wow.
tuition. But he said young adults, and I'm like, can us old people go?
That's right. It's just young. Oh, wow. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's
And I
amazing.
thought, well, it'd be so nice if we could get some transpersonal or, spiritual psychology, those kind of things in there, because we don't have anything like that around here.
As a matter of fact, when I give lectures like Columbia University, I talked about exactly that it should be in the curriculum, because that's one of the things that happen. If somebody goes to any therapist that is not knowledgeable of the experiences or the after effects, it could be harmful, because I have seen it where people are giving diagnoses instead of understanding these experiences. They make the assumption. So going to somebody who's knowledgeable is extremely important. Otherwise, don't go, or interview the person, see if they're open to it, because that's also possible. So again, I think it should be part of the curriculum of when somebody goes to become a therapist, a counselor, to learn about these experiences, because they are more common.
That's why we don't tell. It's because we know they're going to think we're crazy. And
Yes.
I have said over and over, I wish that in triage, when someone goes to the emergency room, that they would have a little checkbox there. Look, one question: have you had any spiritual experiences recently? Because they're not going to tell you, in the emergency squad on the way here, I was suddenly in this pasture, flowers, or whatever. Or I was above the emergency squad, or I stepped on my body and went down the hall and I keep coming back. There could be a red flag that would say trauma room 1 now, instead of give them a Band-Aid and out the door. If they was just ask some kind of question: have you had spiritual experience? Even doctors, you going into your regular checkups, and have you had any spiritual experiences? Maybe they say, well, during the night when I'm sleeping, I feel like I've stopped breathing, and then I have this experience, and no, okay, sleep apnea or whatever, it would be a red flag. Because at 25, I went to the emergency room and I died in the wheelchair in the hallway. And it was 1986. Of course, I couldn't tell my doctor. I was just dead. And he said, "You're fine," and was sending me home. I said, "I'm not going home." And I couldn't say why, because I knew he'd put me in a psych ward. And so I just said, "I'm not going home." And he looked at my husband like, "What is wrong with her?" He says, "Well, since you live an hour away, you can spend the night and make you feel better." I continued to die during the night. No more NDEs, but I kept dying. Well, the next morning, because I prayed to God, just keep me alive till morning. Maybe my doctor will come in early and do another ultrasound, find out what's going on. And so he come in early and did ultrasound. I had the biggest tool pregnancy I ever saw. Internal bleeding, filled my entire abdominal cavity, covered chest. And I keep thinking, I want to use what happened to me to not happen to other people, because I still think we have that gag that we can't say these things. Like, I could not put it out of my mouth. I was just in heaven accepting it, and suddenly I'm back in the wheelchair. Does this mean I'm dying of something?
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. You know what? That's a very good point. That should be part of it should be part of what happens when somebody goes to an emergency room, or when somebody just had a surgery, or when somebody goes to a doctor. Absolutely. You know what? I just had the thought, I want to be an advocate for that.
Awesome. Thank you. I have said it to so many people, and they say, "Yeah, that'd be a good idea." And nobody has said, "I'll be an advocate for that."
Yes. You know what? That's a great idea. I could actually, I'm thinking of going to different places, different hospitals, emergency rooms, and try to speak to the powers to be and see if they could have a meeting with me and talk about it. That would be, thank you.
Well, let me
I
know
want
if
to
you ever
do
want me to
that.
go with you.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. That would be amazing. Well, that's a plan.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So not only it should be in the curriculum for doctors and nurses and therapists, but it should be part of what happens when somebody walks in a hospital. That question should be asked 100%. That's one of the questions that I ask people when they first come to see me, regardless of the reason they came to see me. Have you ever had a spiritual experience or a mystical experience?
And, you know, I just now thought of it. My disabled sister who doesn't communicate well. So whenever she's in the hospital, doctor, I have to be there and be her voice. And last winter, she was in the hospital quite a bit. She's got end stage renal failure. And she went from the nursing home to the emergency room, and they were going to send her back to the nursing home. And I'm like, no, you can't. And was given all the reasons. And I called the nursing home, and together was able to get her admitted in another hospital because they wouldn't admit her. And so I was there with her. And then I could tell something is happening to her. My sister is dying right in front of my eyes. And they were not listening to me. They kept wanting to think she was abused by the nursing home. I'm like, would you stop saying that? Because they said that in the emergency room that wanted to discharge her. They're like, no, she wasn't. I'm telling you, this is my sister. And she says, I'm scared. That's my sister. Nobody abused her. But stop looking at that. And I'm telling you, look at her health. And well, she went catatonic. And they had to give her a medicine. They come in and they said, now, if it was a psychological break, this medicine will bring her out of it. But if it wasn't a psychological break, she'll just go to sleep. Well, she just went to sleep, which I knew she would because I knew she wouldn't abuse the nursing home and had a psychotic break from abuse. I knew something was going on. Well, it ended up being her kidneys was shutting down. But, you know, but as family members, for people that can't speak, then maybe just like you said, out of surgery, if they mumble to us something like a spiritual experience, like I was just with Jesus, people laugh it off. But if they knew to tell the nurse, wait a minute, nurse, they just said they were just with Jesus or they were just out the window. Oh, get everybody in here. Let's see what's going on. This person's dying.
Beautiful.
You know, we need that. We need to stop. People need to stop rolling their eyes at this because lives are at stake.
I know you're absolutely right. And oftentimes they're saying, well, it's lack of oxygen in the brain. It's just a medication. But you know what? The more we talk about it, the more I feel really, really strong to become an advocate. And, you know, Peggy, whenever you want to, we could, if you're on board,
okay,
we'll go together.
Okay.
And start doing it.
Yeah, because, you know, I think of those things, but nobody, I mean, I don't have degrees behind my name. I don't have, you know, anything other than my stories. And so I do have another name in Ohio that we may bring on board if we can come up with something.
Wonderful.
And it's so strange because I met this very nice looking young man who was a psychology pre-med, and he kept coming in every day to talk to me. We just was like chit chat. We just like bonded. And he found out I mentioned near-death experiences. Like, wait a minute, what? My mom is so into that. And come to find out his mom like goes around, gives talks, and she teaches in Ohio and she teaches doctors. So that will be a good.
Oh, wow. Good for her.
I have her phone number that I can share with you.
Great.
And maybe be a place to start.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. Yeah, that is absolutely so needed. So at least we could start here in Ohio.
Yeah, because he says, call my mom. I'm really? And we talked for like an hour. And so.
And you being an experiencer, having had a near-death experience in a hospital, that's, you know, that speaks louder than anything.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Because I by all rights should have died. You know what I mean? And if I would have died that night, nobody would have known. This could have been prevented if I could have spoke up and said, I just died in a wheelchair, and then the doctor take me seriously and say, wait a minute, I'm going to go ahead and do this ultrasound right now.
Yeah,
That he would have made a huge difference.
Yes, absolutely. It could have made a big difference for you. So having had that experience, you're a perfect advocate for that, obviously.
Yeah. And I'm passionate about it, you know.
Yeah. Well, I feel very strongly about it. That's big.
Okay.
Well,
So I will, we get done talking, I will send you that lady's information. And maybe we can
absolutely.
get a ball rolling.
Anytime. I'm very happy to do it.
Okay.
Definitely.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I would like to add that, let's see, that there is help to integrate these experiences, because I have to say it takes years to integrate these experiences in someone's life. To integrate it means to be able to be happy on planet Earth, on 3D, experiencing this life and, completing your purpose. That's what you want. So fortunately, there is help, not only as a therapist, but there are groups, so there is fortunately ways in which you could integrate it little by little. There are people who actually takes a lifetime.
There's people in the near-death experience groups on Facebook that do not want you to talk about this on their wall. I didn't know that. And I would like to start a conversation with them about, say, hey, do not talk about, I don't want anybody knowing about this, whether their
Yes.
career or their family wouldn't understand, their religion, whatever. I'm like, oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, for fear of sharing it, because people get pathologized or people think that you're crazy. Literally, I've heard that. They share it with a friend and the friend says, please don't ever call me again. I think you have psychiatric issues. You should get help.
Right.
So I could understand that.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, we know certain groups, we can't talk about this, or they would look at us like that.
Exactly.
And shun us. I mean,
Yes.
even to the point where you may not have your job.
That's exactly right. And it's so sad, because we're all going to experience this sooner or later. So the more is out there, like, is normalized as part of a human experience, the more people are going to be able to talk about it freely.
Yeah. And then we could get in a whole other discussion, people that see ghosts, how
Yes.
people are going to react to them. Like, oh my God, here we go.
And that's something that happens to people who have near-death experiences. They're able to see spirits and ghosts. Yeah, they could see. It's not that they don't see something that is weird. They just have a much more open perspective. We just have a more open perspective. That's all. That's it.
And then, some of us get these psychic experiences, these knowledges out of nowhere, and we deny them and we don't go follow through to what we're being told to do. And then we have such guilt later because something happened.
That's exactly right. When you get premonitions, which happens to a lot of people who have near-death experiences or Kundalini experience, because you open up these channels, you have premonitions. So yeah, that's very common as well. That's very true.
I mean, I know it's a fine line between batshit crazy, as some people call it, and your intuition is right on target. That it's like I say, we gotta check our own pulse and see crazy, not crazy, and that's a hard thing to do to ourselves.
That's right. Yes. You see, it's good to sharpen that intuition. And of course, it gets sharpened by having these experiences. Your intuition is your higher self telling you. It's a navigation system. It's your higher self telling you which way you should go and what's going on. Yeah.
And then honestly, I know people that think they have this intuition and think they have, and they're so confident in it. I can tell they don't have anything. They don't even know what they're talking about. They're just trying to talk the talk and make people think they have all this knowledge. I'm like,
I know, that's funny. That's true. That happens.
I mean, I'm sure you run into that too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah.
And I mean, they talk to you 1 minute and, oh, you this and you that, and they just got you all figured out. I'm like, you're so far off topic, you know, you don't know. Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
And nobody wants to be that person to where you're going around thinking you know everything about everything and everybody knows you don't know anything. You don't want to be that girl.
That's right. Exactly. That's very true. Well,
And I think it's, you know, constantly checking yourself and testing, experimenting. Okay, I feel this, I'm going to follow through and see what happens. And wow, I was right about that. Or, and my thing I've learned is to, and it's hard, is voices come in and like yell something right now. That's always true. But if I get thinking and like maybe this, maybe that, that's my mind.
Right.
And it's probably not going to be accurate. Like, I think somebody's out there and I think they're hurting my dog. You know what I mean? Your mind can get wandering. But if all of a sudden you're like, go check on your dog right now, you know, that is, there's a difference. A voice coming in versus this voice in here just messing around.
Yeah, that's just the intellect part of yourself. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. That's true. Yeah. And also your intuition also is that gut feeling. You know, that it's not from here. You know that your digestive system has brain cells. That's that gut feeling, that thought that comes from your intuition. I don't know if you heard about it, but
yeah,
but I
it's
see
like a brain in your stomach.
Yes. Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense because our body tells us when we're hungry. It tells us when we're tired or all these things, but yet when it's telling us these other things, no, that's not right.
Right. Yeah, but when it's your higher self, your intuition, you just know it. Yeah. And of course you could practice it. Like you said, oh yeah, I was right. What I've sensed, what I felt was right.
Yeah. And then start to remember how that sounded and how you felt, how it come about. Start paying attention. Maybe even, you know, some people keep a journal. And so they could fine tune what was just a nonsense thing that they created in their mind. And I have found with me, I start arguing with it because it's always something I don't want to do. Like, you need to go take your friend to go see their dad because he's going to die. No, I don't want to do that. I'm busy paying. Wait a minute. I'm arguing with it. What am I arguing with? That's not me, because that's not something I'm thinking about. But if it's something I'm thinking about, and then I start, oh, well, maybe, nah. That's creativity.
That's funny.
So, well, thank you so much. It's been very interesting.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was an honor and a pleasure doing this. And definitely, you know, let's get in touch about, you know, advocating in hospitals.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, Peggy. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.